You gotta love the bagpipes. Rumor has it on the mean streets of Rogers City that Bon Scott learned how to play the bagpipes so they wouldn't have to bring in a piper from the outside that he would do it. That is so cool. Wouldn't you love to see that? Go back in time and see him in concert playing that song. Oh, man. Get your blood going. Okay. Now for bow stuff. Entitled Board Bow Blank. And I'm going to double up. Rounding the back and tillering. Because I want to tiller it. Tiller the bow before I fire harden it. Because, you know, if you think about it, I've fire hardened the bow. And then I'm going to reduce it, which means you're removing the belly wood that was fire hardened. I'm not saying it doesn't penetrate to a great deal if you fire harden slowly and it's not just like a superficial thing where you just take a torch and, you know, blast the belly to make it black. But give it every advantage. And so I'm going to not only round the back in this process, I'm going to tiller it, which I have an example here. But I have, How I Met Your Mother, a board bow blank. In this case, it's one of 3 that I prepared that has 5 nice tendons. I handpicked them, so there's no shorties here. A tillering string, the bowstring, which I don't know if you can see it. It's white, so it looks like actual real sinew. It has hide glue, the leather for the handle buckskin, and also it has this handy dandy rounding guide, which is 3 inches in diameter. Now I did a video earlier and it was just wacky. I just did a wacky video, you know, but I was actually showing the process on this bow, my home guard, rounding the back to 3 inches in diameter. And it's simple. It's simple. Sometimes you want to just watch a YouTube video where somebody's doing something, but you can understand it. I'll tell you how I done did it, and then you know. It's simple. Basically, I will start in the center of the bow, and I used my master for this, the template, which I made this from, 3 inches diameter. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but good diameter for the horse bow in this. And you can see, picture it was made from a tree of this diameter. A reasonable little tree. They didn't chop down a 253-year-old oak tree that's just massive and then found a nice size sapling, cut it down, and made bow out of it. And so, represented by this. And simply, starting in the center, just stick it on there. And I use my knife in a sanding block with 80 grit, but basically the knife just to scrape, 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 just move along the bow and make it this round. What happens if it's not perfect? Trees aren't perfect. You're not going to find a sapling that's perfectly cylindrical. So, you know, as long as you're more or less not seeing any daylight through that crack, same here as there, whatever. You could use lines. You don't need to use one of these things to round the back of a bow. You could just scribe lines, 2 parallel lines on the back, along the side thickness, bevel it, and then round it. It doesn't need to be an exact science. I'm just rounding the back. Why do I round the back? Why? Well, a couple reasons. The bows, my board bow blanks, they could be self bows if you wanted, but you know, let's add some insurance. Let's back them, which means you are adding structure to the tensional load-bearing surface of the back. And so you're adding rawhide, you're adding sinew, which if you botched it and you went through a growth ring or something like that, or you didn't sand it smooth, blah, 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 whatever. It's the rawhide, in this case, with the horsebow blank, sinew. So, you know, whatever. I like a crowned back. And I will crown, which means you're rounding, you're crowning it. I will crown the back of a stave bow. You know, I've got this wonderful one growth ring kind of a thing running down the back. Sometimes, if it's from a large diameter tree, larger, I will crown it. I don't like flat backs. I do not lie. For one reason, it's visual. You know, part of the draw of primitive archery is that's a cool looking bow. And second of all, bows like, for efficiency, they like to be pushing limits. And by rounding the back, not rounded, but pretend, by rounding the back, you're reducing the area on that back right down the center. That's where it's happening. You're causing more of the tensional load to be centered down the back. And so, you know, without making that bow skinnier and reducing the amount of surface area, surface volume goes in a little bit on the belly, which is under compression. So you're jacking up the tensional loads, but you're good with distributed compression loads. They say bows break from tension. They get follow from compression. So, you know, I'm increasing the stress for tension and then decreasing the stress for squishing, compression, by rounding the backs. As long on a stave-made bow, and again, you know, I like round backs. I just think they're more efficient as bows. You know, probably people are screaming, "Oh, Sage bows, I made it from a big tree and it's rectangular." Yeah, it's a good bow. It's a very good bow. You know, but I work in whitewoods a lot too, so I'm multifaceted. But anyway, moving right along, if you were to look at this as the blank that wasn't rounded, it would look kind of clunky. I don't like clunky bows. You know, so I work on the handles, making them graceful, making them pretty. Why not? You know, I just don't like clunky bows. And rounding the back, to me, everyone has their own personal preferences. That's good. Differences make the world go round. Yeah, I just like rounded backs. That's it. Oh, I've got this thing lingering in the background. This is American elm. It's American elm, right? American elm. American elm first. I went political on you. And the reason why this is red oak made from a board and not this is still seasoning a little bit. It still has some time to cook. And it's going to be made into a series of these. So I'm going to actually have unbacked elm hole guards, which is going to be super cool. Anyway, that's it. You round the back. This is about rounding back. Just round the back. Use that guide. I used, again, the same one on this home guard to represent a small tree. This one's a little bigger, so it's going to have a different thickness profile. Now, it is a, before I get into tillering, it is a kind of a, you think mulberry beds, right? Mollies. You've got a bow, and it's got needle tips like that. You'd say, well, the needle tips don't bend. They act like levers. Well, in the case of these things, taking off the dimensions of the actual one, they actually bend. You know, you get advantage from weight reduction having the tips bend. You do. They're a little thicker, they're narrower, and so overall the mass has been reduced because stiffness is more of a function in this case of thickness than it is of width. 4 to 1. 4 to 1. I'll let you puzzle that out. So you do get, with needle tips bending, they would be lighter than if it was just, you know, a standard bow width all the way to the tips. And so these people, this 10,000-year-old bow design is amazingly engineered. And I was thinking as I was tillering this thing, getting the bend in it, I was thinking, I wonder, you know, how much engineering knowledge these people had. And it's probably pretty tremendous to come up with this style of face profile. Really is. As far as rounding this portion, you know, kind of squaring this, they were remarkably smart. And look at this. You don't even have to have, there's no string grooves. There's no collar of sinew on this one. This one kind of slipped a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to have your string grooves in when you're tillering these things. You could take this one, you've rounded the back, and you've reduced the weight greatly. I mean, I had to kind of guesstimate. I even wrote, that's the belly side on them, because there's a difference. I reduced it quite a bit, and I had to guess it. How thick do I make this to make a reasonable weight bow, and not too heavy, and not too light, to zero in once you round the back? You might have to, when you tiller it, to make sure the limbs are even, you know, and get it pretty much set. Everything is rounded, ready for fire hardening, so you don't need to like scrape off any of that wood that's fire hardened. You might have to tiller it a little bit. Now here's the highly complex tillering method. I used, in the case of this, I used a very rough grit on my orbital disc sander, because it's not like a save-made bow where you have to like go around roller coasters and ginks and stuff like that. This was basically tillered from the get-go. It was even, right? So I rounded it. I rounded the edges to my liking on the back because I wanted to get a good feel of how much belly wood to remove, and I'm not going to round it very much. I'm going to round it more than I normally would on the belly because it's a home guard, and they were probably like cheating a little bit, scraping it and rounding the belly somewhat. Wanted to kind of keep in with the times. But all I did was I stick it on my foot. I'm looking at the lower limb. I'm doing the lower limb right now. I'm going to be out of your view, but you have to pretend. And I can see the bend in the bow nicely. And all I did was take my orbital disc sander and just even numbers on both sides. You know, if I ran that orbital disc sander like 8 times back and forth, full length, not really worrying about if I need to hit it here or here, which I was, because I've got an excellent view when it's resting on my foot. I can see where it needs more bend or less bend. Just back orbital disc sander. You could use a scraper, you could use a sanding block, you could use whatever you want. I used my Western Cutlery W84 NRA commemorative knife to round the back. Just scraping. I don't need to get in the great detail. I just scraped it and then just ran that thing down. That's it. And I pretty much covered everything. This is... It's easy to see the bend when you're like, close your right eye if you're right-handed and look down here and spot it. And I can tell it's a good weight. It's probably going to be about 55 pounds when I finish, which is a nice weight. You know, already I'm going to pop these things off. I'm going to work on the handle a little bit. Yeah, that's that. You now know how to round the back, and you know how to tiller, and you know, it's, again, you don't need to have string grooves on these things to string it for tillering it. You could even take some string and make a collar around that, and you're saying, well, the string would fall off, right? Well, then just take some tape and wrap it around there, and now you've got a collar for your string. There's ways around stuff. There really are. I'm going to finish this one up. I love the reflex in this, you know, this Osage bow I've been working on forever. Again, my day job just takes so much energy. I'm not as productive bow making as I could be. But that's life. Life sometimes gets in the way, you know, I got to pay the bills. If you want to contact me for, again, this is like the coolest little kit. You know, and I've sanded these to a higher degree than I normally do. You know, it's pretty silky smooth there. If you want to get one of those with everything necessary to make a super cool horse bow, I guess I left the finished one in the house. You know, or if you're interested in like one of my paddle bows or the snake bow, paddle bows, just look up I am John, this is my bow video. That's paddle bow, that's just like that one right there. 70-yard shot. First time. Just hit the box at 70 yards where I wanted to. Or the talisman, look up my talisman bow, or the snake bow, or whatever, you know. If you want to buy a blank or finish one, just get a hold of me. And I've done the paddle bows in so many paint schemes. So many cool paint schemes. that is all. I'm going to go eat something. You know what I do? I just get old Jiffy corn muffin mix, right? Take sweet potatoes or pumpkin pie filling, mix it in with that. Throw some cinnamon in it. Throw some walnuts, kind of crush them up. Bake it in your cast iron skillet, and you got this greatest like cake that makes a nice meal, you know, on the run. And I use 1.5 Jiffy mix boxes. Let's see here, you bake it a little longer. What's I gonna say? 350 degrees, and it usually takes like 22 minutes, you know, depends on the oven, because I added more Jiffy mix. And it just comes right out of the pan if you grease the cast iron skillet with like bacon fat or something. The bacon helps. Heck, cook bacon and grind it up and throw it in there. That would make it even better. Look at all the stuff you're learning. You're welcome.